caregiver, in other words, the child of the aging parent, to broach these subjects?
No, planning is a two-way street. Everybody needs to get involved because it's a family responsibility.
It is, though, difficult for a lot of people to jump in and talk about this.
Very difficult because we're talking about the future of our aging parents. It's a tough situation.
A lot of times also the parents are very reluctant to give up control of their lives, which is how they feel when the child begins to start to do the planning and all that stuff for them.
That's right. So we have to be very careful about how we approach the subject, and planning plays a part in being able to keep them open to some of our ideas.
So in terms of the elder parent, the main advice you have is start early with the planning.
Definitely.
Also, you say it's very important for the caregiver to say, listen, if I'm going to be independent, I have to do something that sounds like a contradiction, and that's ask for help.
That's right. So accept help from people, not only in the family, but also from people outside of the family. Maybe there's somebody in the church, a neighbor, anybody. Say yes, you need help.
How do you get your affairs in order, which is your next tip?
Right. Get started on the paperwork right away and do your family a favor by initiating the durable power of attorney. Give them important telephone numbers, let them know about proof of insurance, let them know about your financial status, things like that.
When you say it's important to specify issues, does this mean that, hey, if it's money that's going to be the problem, let's talk about money. If it's housing, talk about housing.
You can even get more specific. You could say, what exactly is the problem you're trying to solve? And then a tip for family members is to clip newspaper articles, show it to your parents, and say, here, it could cost as much as $4,000 a month to pay for long-term care. How are we going to do this? Show it to them in black and white.
And then take it a step further and ask those quote-unquote what-if questions. What happens if?
That's right. You can actually talk about your options in the planning stage, saying, well, what if I did move and I didn't like it? What could I do then?
Let's switch things now to the point of view of the caregiver. How does the child avoid the feeling that he or she is becoming their parent's parent?
Right. The golden rule in elder care is this: never ever do for your parents what they can do for themselves. Support every bit of independence that they have, because elder care is not going to be based on age. It's always going to be based on ability.
As a matter of fact, the first tip you have for caregivers is don't take control, but there is an enormous temptation to do that.
Sure, because we may see our parents as an aging problem to solve, and they aren't a problem.
Open up a dialogue is your next tip. What happens if I approach my mom and I say, Mom, I want to talk about money, and she says, you know what, my financial situation is not your business?
Right. One of the best ways to open up the dialogue is to ask advice. This reminds our parents that we still respect their views. So instead you could say, Mom, I'm thinking about creating my own will. What did you do for yours? Do you have any tips for me? This is also a great way to find out if they have a will.
If the child starts to feel pressure as the parent gets older, you have to only imagine that the parent is feeling that same pressure. And you say as your next tip, take the parent off the hot seat.
Right. Keep the focus on these conversations on the well-being of everybody in the family. Our parents aren't a problem to solve. Everything that happens to our parents happens to all of us.
Let's stop and talk about that for a second. You're saying never make it seem as if this is a problem, that this is more of the normal functioning of an ordinary family.
Exactly. This is a family responsibility that has to do with everybody. Remind everybody who's talking about this that what happens to them happens to us all.
Pick the best person to do the job, and I like the way you explain this.
Right. You know that saying, Mom always liked you best? Well, this is the best time to take advantage of that situation. Maybe you're not the best one for the job. Maybe there's another sibling who could do a better job.
But that can be a cop-out for the person who Mom didn't always like best to say, well, I don't want to get involved in this. Let Sister handle this.
Well, that happens, but the relationships that already exist typically are the ones that can do the better job. In my own family, it was my father's best friend who was able to help him get a hearing aid. He wouldn't listen to any of us kids. So the best person for the job may not be us.
And you say that it's important to remember that questions are the best way to handle things, not statements.
Right. You make a statement and our parents are liable to dig in their heels and say...
In other words, Mom, you have to move.
Exactly. A better thing to say would be, have you given any thought to what you would do if you wanted to move?
Joy Loverde, it's a subject we're all going to have to deal with from one side of the fence or the other. Important information. Thanks very much. 8:49. Mike Leonard is up next, but first, this is Today on NBC.